these kind of workshops or seminars, it's funny because I usually have a kind of a thing to show everyone. And it's usually, so we'll be doing something like this. It usually goes 6 to 8 hours. So when Judah and Nikki and everyone told me that it should actually be a max of 40 minutes, well, did a little bit of a iteration, a little bit of scrambling. So I hope you guys find this entertaining. I certainly do. So, I want to know a little bit more about you guys. Given that this is a little bit of a live stream where folks are going to come in later, or watch this on LinkedIn or YouTube, I'll go ahead and skip this, but I usually kind of gauge, I'm going to make some assumptions. I'm going to make some assumptions that a lot of folks that are watching in haven't really, they have a passing interest about web development, things like that, maybe heard a little bit about HTML, CSS, want to kind of learn more, get their feet wet. Hopefully this workshop will prove that, Here's the thing. A lot of people kind of think it's like, well, I need to learn how to code, right? And it's not so much about learning how to code. I mean, that's kind of the dirty little secret to all of this. And while yes, you do have to, when you go to a program like Wyncode or any other coding bootcamp, right? You do learn how to use those programming languages, but more importantly, you're trying to think programmatically, right? You're trying to take a big abstract problem and you're trying to break it out in little chunks, and that's kind of what any programming is about, and that is absolutely the case for web development. All right. So as I said, we usually do this 6 to 8 hours. So we're going to do a little bit of a different strategy this time around. Usually when I do our events, they're called introductions, we have everyone building a toy. So this time around, rather than building the toy, I'm going to ask you guys to take a toy apart. We will be dismantling a web page or a web application. So why a toy, right? Toys are great. They're fun. They're shiny, right? They're also totally breakable, right? If you break a toy, no problem, nothing bad. You can just get another one, right? And I want to show you that it is totally okay to break things. Breaking things doesn't mean, your computer has a puff of smoke and bursts into flames, right? Not at all. It just means that maybe the computer doesn't understand the instructions you are giving them, right? That's all those things usually are. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a particular web application. And this is going to be the Magic 8-Ball. I have this link here. And we will go ahead and take a look at it. Well, let me show you what the web application is right now. So I'll go ahead and load this up. There is our Magic 8-Ball. I can type in a question. And then I'll go ahead and shake. Thank goodness. That would have been really sad if it said I would have been alone forever, right? But that's an example of something like a toy, right? There is, you have some functionality, and at the end of the day, there are certain technologies that talk about it, and we'll go ahead and talk about those things, right? The big parts of these, involve HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And for any of you guys that want to kind of play along with the stream, if you go to that link that I set up a couple slides ago, this one right here, right? You can actually go ahead, start typing And what it will do is that it will actually create your own copy that you can play with. So you will actually get your own URL. Even a user account isn't necessary. It's only necessary if you want to, have it remember the next time you log in, right? But even in the cases of those, you don't necessarily need to use it, right? So I am going to be using a tool called REPL.it, right? REPL.it. And what this is that this is going to be, well, it's going to be a little bit of a sandbox of sorts, right? A sandbox meaning instead of having you, go into your hard drive and install a bunch of things and have you create folders, you can go to a website and you can create your own sandbox. And what you'll do is if you go to this URL and start typing away, that's exactly what will happen, right? You'll go in and it will copy over the code that I have here. We call it, in technical jargon, we call it forking, as in a fork in a road. And we'll use that, and you can use it as a launching point to look at the code itself. If you're wondering why this screen is white, it's because there are little things, right? So we can actually click on the run button. And what this will do is that this will load in all of the code that we have here. I also have some buttons. And this shows kind of a little bit of like a mini file explorer where we can look at different files that we will be using for our little breakable toy or magic 8-ball today. All right, so let's just get to it. So at the end of the day, web development is all about text files, literally text files. And when we're making web applications, there are 3 particular text files that your web browser is downloading. So they're just getting text files, and then your browser knows that they are particular types, and then it paints the things that they see on the browser. And that is all web development is at the end of the day. So we'll talk a little bit about HTML, which hopefully you have at least heard of, and then some other technologies that makes this magic 8-ball looking good and running like a magic 8-ball, right? So we are going to use HTML, CSS. CSS is kind of like the window dressing of HTML. And then last but not least, JavaScript. And you guys may have heard of JavaScript. It's definitely one of the hotter languages right now in web development. At Wyncode, we use it from both the browser's perspective and to build things like servers, which are a relatively new thing in the world of web development, but it's definitely picking up, and we absolutely learned both of that. In our world, we call that full stack development, because you're working on the front end, which is a browser, and then you're working on the back end, which are things like servers and databases, right? Anything that you're kind of painting using your web browser is called front end development, okay? So let's talk, I already talked a little bit about how web browsers work. So they basically download files, text files, and then we use that to kind of paint that to the screen, right? Now, if you're following around, you can also go to REPL. Go ahead and use that link that I showed earlier. If you are just following along from a live stream or watching this on YouTube. And I've also shared it, if you're watching this live and inside the Zoom chat, I've also shared it within the Zoom chat as well. All right, so let's take a look at HTML5. So HTML5 stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And funnily enough, HTML5 is technically not really considered a programming language, right? which sounds weird, right? But to understand why I would say that, we have to kind of understand the context about how HTML was originally created, right? HTML is what we call a markup language. Markup has been around for a while, right? People have been marking up documents for centuries, right? The Gutenberg Bible in the 1450s. The Chinese were marking up text thousands of years ago, right? Things like that. So markup is not necessarily a brand new idea. It's just taking that concept, applying it to something like web pages. And to kind of understand the context, what you're looking at now is kind of one of the earlier web pages that existed, right? So early web browsers were used by, say, educational institutions, right? And maybe public or government institutions as a way to share information, just words, right? Maybe some other documents, but mostly talking about their own institutions and sharing that type of information across the internet, right? So this HTML has been in this format for literally decades, right? And of course, as we have gone on, right, and as there have been different kind of commercial endeavors to take that and commercialize the internet, things like AOL, right? There's been a need for markup, what was previously just words and blue links, to become a little bit more like something like a newspaper layout, right? So HTML is also being used for pages like Yahoo, right? So there's HTML tags that look like these newspaper letter layouts, all right? So let me show you what a tag actually looks like. So a tag looks something like this, right? So here we are. Here we are back in our Magic 8-Ball, right? And so I have a pristine version for you. I am going to go ahead and fork it so that I have a version that I can play with on my own, and any changes that I make, you won't be able to see, right? So I'll go ahead, and these are examples of HTML tags, right? So we have an opening tag, we have a closing tag, right? And then sometimes we have information in here. Now, you'll notice that I could, in theory, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the text, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to cut and paste just to show you something. So I'm going to cut the text, I'll paste it back shortly, but hello, can you see this? Is this just some regular text? I'm a turtle. I don't know why I wrote that. I just wanted to prove a point. I'll go ahead and click on run. Hey, look at that. There's just some text. So interestingly enough, at the end of the day, what HTML is that it's just a way to show text marked up to the internet, right? And it's mostly focused solely on transferring and talking about content, right? So different tags do different things. So a good example of this is something called the P tag, right? So the browser has various things that tell it to act certain ways, right? The P tag, interesting, right? Can you guess what the P tag stands for? If not, totally okay, because the P stands for paragraph, right? So a lot of text that we have in here, we can nest them between tags to do certain things, right? I'll give you some examples. I'll do the word strong. Ah, accidentally typed that. Strong. And this text is now bolded, right? So I can give certain rules to this and it'll do the same, right? I'm going to paste my magic 8-ball back. So at the end of the day, what you see here is what you get. So you'll notice that this H1, well, the H in H1 stands for header, right? And headers basically tell the web page that certain sections of the web page are useful. And actually, you know what? Websites like Google also take advantage of that to index certain keywords to give different phrases different strengths, right? So I invite you to, just try tinkering. So go ahead and what I would do is just like play around, right? Just playing around, right? And then go ahead and click on run. Interesting. Okay. So let's see what happens if I remove a tag. Uh-oh. But that looks a little weird, doesn't it? Right? But I want to just kind of emphasize what it didn't do, right? The computer didn't blow up, right? You didn't get a blue screen of death, right? No one's dead, right? But I'm mostly showing you that it is totally okay to break things, right? Because what I certainly do as someone who spent 20 years in this industry is that the way I learn is by looking at other people's code and basically figuring out how it works, right? A little bit of a reverse engineering thing, right? So we are learning that certain tags act certain ways, right? And I invite you to kind of play around and kind of remove certain tags, see if it works. And if it doesn't work, go ahead and paste it back in, or you can use things like Control Z to undo any changes, right? So you would use something like undo, hold down Command Z if you're on a Mac, and that will undo the thing that you're looking to do, right? See, like that? Yeah. So we're learning something. We're learning that certain tags relate to certain things inside our web page, right? This button looking thing. So it looks like there's some tags and I can write something inside. Press me. How about that? Right? So you can play around with things like that and see examples of this. Now, at the end of the day, this is about content, right? And it's not necessarily about visuals, right? Did you notice I haven't, I have a beautiful photo of West Palm in the back. I mean, there's no references to images here, right? And how does this know that the 8-ball is black or it should be round? That seems super weird, right? And this is where CSS comes in. And what CSS is that CSS basically acts as, it's short for cascading style sheets for one. And what it does is it takes those HTML tags and it gives rules. It gives certain visual rules of how certain tags will look. All right, so let's go back to our HTML again, right? So we see this file here, right? The file is called style.css. So CSS is our style sheet, our CSS file. Let's go ahead and click. Oh, wow. This looks crazy, right? It has a different, format of characters and symbols. We use the word syntax, but this is a different set of rules which tell our web browser how things should look, right? And they have these kind of preset properties, right? A series of things on the left, and then there's a colon, and then there's some sort of thing on the right, right? Now, what I'm saying here in a lot of these is, okay, remember those HTML tags we looked at from this index.html? What it looks like is that it is saying apply certain visuals to certain HTML elements. All right, so that's kind of interesting. So it looks like we can go in and we could do some really interesting things. Here's a good example. Let's just start with body, right? So I have this photo of West Palm, right? And I can go ahead, and what I'm going to do is that it looks like these lines in a really dark green. I'm just using English, right? So those are called comments. And even as someone who's been in this industry for a long time, I will still write comments in our code, right? I will still, just give myself notes, because at the end of the day, what I'm doing is I'm thinking programmatically. I'm thinking how to do certain things, but I'm thinking of it in English, right? All I have to do then, or all anyone has to do from there, is translate those thoughts from English to code, or instructions a computer or web browser will understand, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment these lines out, and I can comment them out by typing in /*, and I'm going to add a space because I'm a little OCD. And then at the end, I'm going to add the characters */. And you notice how this went dark green? That's how I know it worked, right? The colors are actually something given to me by the website REPL trying to be useful, right? So I'm going to do the same for this one. And let's press run. Interesting. Okay, so what did it do? It looked like that photo went away. But now it's this blue, right? I see what's going on. So there's this thing called background color, and I use this color, deep sky blue. Now, REPL has a lot of really interesting things. And one of the things that REPL, this website, does is that it gives you a lot of helpers to try to kind of add some tools to make your life as a web developer a little easier, right? So I can play around with this, and I can choose kind of a color. I'm clicking on this. I am team orange myself, so maybe something, given that it's Halloween, right? I'll click away. Do you notice this square turned a little bit different? Again, that's REPL being helpful, right? So I'll click on run. Look at that. Kind of cool, right? Page kind of looks like a pumpkin spice latte. I only say that because I'm literally drinking a pumpkin spice latte right now. Let's try another one. Take the HTML element from the 8-ball class. So it looks like whatever I put in here is going to help bring visual styles to that 8-ball, right? Let's just make this. What is the name of the red ball? Is it a 1? I think it's a 1 ball, right? So we can try this. Click away. You'll notice that square turned red, and then last but not least, Interesting, right? So play around, especially with things like colors, right? But if nothing else, I'm showing this to kind of show that you have a lot of control, right? And listen, if something doesn't go right, or the colors don't look weird, or you click on run and then something feels wrong like that, at the end of the day, it's not that it's not that the computer is going to blow up or you did something terrible. The browser just got some instructions it can't understand. Why? Because computers are actually really dumb. They're not like humans. They can't process complex things, but they take instructions really well, and they're really good at math, right? So when all else fails, Control Z out. There it is, right? So last but not least, we got ourselves a weird pumpkin spice looking web page with a totally not black 8-ball. It should technically be a 1-ball, right? I don't even know if that's technically right. I think if I remember my billiards, that is how a billiards ball works. So last thing for sure, JavaScript. What JavaScript does is that it will bring, the other demo I usually give when it's something like CSS is I want you to see what it looks like if I took everything out. So I'm going to do a Control select all cut. I'll press it all back in shortly. I'm going to click on run. Whoa, that looks super different. But interestingly enough, the content is still here. And I have a number 8 for 8-ball, right? So if nothing else, I wanted to just kind of hammer the point home that CSS adds visuals. It adds some visuals and styling and things like that, right? But the content is still there, and that's what HTML is all about. So I'm going to paste it right back in, run this. There it is, all right? Now, last thing, how about the functionality, right? The functionality to make our 8-ball, essentially an 8-ball, is now we're going to use JavaScript. So JavaScript, unlike HTML, is definitely a computer programming language, right? Things where it will look for steps, basic steps, right? And while same rules, while a web browser though, if a web browser sees instructions that it doesn't really know, it'll do its best, right? With JavaScript, like most programming languages, if you don't type it in the way a programming language expects you to, it's going to freak out, right? It's not a bad thing. It's just that computers are dumb. They don't know what you're trying to do, right? It needs to be an exact thing, right? It's also one of the reasons why folks new to web development get really frustrated, because typos are a thing in English language or computer programming, right? But as humans, if we read a typo, we understand what it says and we correct it. In computers, there's a typo. Computers aren't smart, so they just break down. And by break down, of course, I mean give you an error. There's not going to be any blue smoke, I promise. Right? So let's look at this. And actually, fun fact, there's actually a little bit of JavaScript down here, right? And what this is this is something that we call a console, right? So I can type in something like hello. I'll press enter and it's okay. It parroted back the word hello to me, right? 3 plus 3, yes, 6, but these are examples of things that JavaScript can do. 3 plus 3 isn't going to help us build us an 8-ball page. However, let's see what it does do. In this case, the thing it does is that it is going to basically take this 8-ball give me an answer to it. So let's take a look. Now it looks a little intimidating at first, but let's see what's going on. Oh, wow, right? A big part of computer programming is trying to understand steps, right? And things basically trying to, and figuring out things that the computer knows, like words or numbers. Those are called data types, right? And then those words and numbers get stored into memory addresses. I think of them as shoeboxes, but technically we call them variables, right? So you may have heard of those concepts. They're very kind of centralized in concepts of computer programming. But let's take a look at one particular type of programming, a data type called an array. So let's take a look. So we have this bracket, right? We have this bracket and we have a bunch of things in orange, right? All the things in orange have one thing in common. They have quotes in them. They got one more thing in common. There is a comma. Huh. So if I keep on pressing, it looks like it's choosing one of these messages, right? But these are some pretty lousy messages. Here's what I want you guys to do, and this is going to be the most interactive kind of part. So for the folks that are actually on Zoom chat, you can either unmute or type in Zoom chat. It is totally up to you, but let's put some messages in here. So someone give me some ideas on what you would like me to choose for this very customizable magic 3-ball. Thank you, Judah.
How about not a chance, buddy?
Not a chance, buddy. All right, how about some others? Sure. Can't talk asleep right now. Anyone else?
Depends who's asking.
That's a great one. Depends who is asking. Now, you see what I'm doing here? I see one from Zoom chat. If you play your cards right. Now, you see what I'm doing here, though? I'm putting in information, right? I'm giving these things, I'm giving these messages. We're going to call them strings, right? Because those words are a type of the data. And we're putting it inside this shoebox called messages. And then the goal is that we're going to build some steps that we usually do to pick one of those messages out like they were cards in a hat, right? So let's click. So go ahead and type some stuff out, right? Now with JavaScript, as a reminder, click on run, because what run will do is it will reload all of the changes that you have, right? Yeah, it does not auto-save, right? If you're playing around with this, you may have kind of figured this out accidentally. So let's go ahead and press, ask a question. Yes, what's a good yes or no question is pumpkin spice great or what? Click on press me and can't talk asleep right now, right? You see what's happening there? So I can go ahead and click on press me a couple more times. And there we go, right? Now, keep in mind, the whole thing I have, maybe you put in some things, maybe you put in a message that used air quotes, or maybe you forgot an ending quote, right? Here's what happens. So let's click on run. And then let's scroll up a little bit. Whoa, uh-oh. Something is in red, I'm freaking out, right? But here's the thing. They are just instructions. It's your browser just telling you it doesn't know what to do, right? Because, again, like I said previously, it's really picky, right? So it's telling me, hey, something's wrong. An invalid or inspected token means I'm looking for something and I didn't see it. But it also tells me where to look. So it's on line 5. And I look on line 5 and I'm like, I see what we did. We forgot our quotes, right? So you might have a situation where something isn't orange. Maybe you put in some air quotes. If these things are a different color, that's your hint that something may not be exactly right. You know, for sake of time, I won't talk about how you would fix this issue. So just make sure. Let's just make sure they look okay, right? So kind of wrapping things up. And of course, feel free to play around with these things, right? Go ahead and add some messages. And incidentally, you may have noticed I added comments, right? So it kind of explains what each line is doing. And I did that for a reason, kind of hammering the point home that at the end of the day, all this is that they are some instructions to tell the browser to do something, right? And because computers, you know, are really kind of, I wasn't going to say primordial, but that's not the word I'm looking for. But because they're stupid, we have to give them maybe multiple steps in a row. But play around with it, right? This is now your toy. This is now your toy to play around with and tinker and show off to friends and family, right? The way you would show this is that you see this link right here. You can actually share this. And you can actually load this into your own browser the way I just did it now. So show it off. Play around with it. Tinker with the code. See what you can get. Look on Google, right? There's a lot of really interesting things there, right? So, and then if you want to, on the pro tip, try doing other things. See if you can get a psychedelic 8-ball, right? See if you can get the 8-ball to literally shake. It's totally possible with CSS and JavaScript, right? If you can do that, send me the link. It's a fun challenge. So that pretty much kind of wraps it up. I want to mention that, like, if you want to, this is obviously kind of just a taste of the type of project I go through. I run every couple of months me and my other head instructor, Cease, we run these things called Wintroductions, which are a full day of talking about web development or UX UI, and we bring in folks like alumni and things like that. And I go through this in much more detail, 8 hours worth of more detail, right? So if this is something that's interested, you're more than welcome to join us there. And then Judah, who is our awesome marketing person, has set up some amazing events related to things that we do at Wyncode. And we invite you to absolutely take a look at some of these events if they appeal to you. And they, of course, are all taught by various folks, head instructors, associate instructors from the Wyncode instructional team, right? So thank you so much. Open to questions. Thank you for having us. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Right. And I also see that you guys dropped the link in for is it Ripple? Is that how you say
Yes.
it? Ripple? Okay,
Yep.
so I'll share that with a follow-up email to the attendees. So if anybody wants to see that as well. But yeah, thanks, Ernie. You did an awesome job. You really got my attention with pumpkin spice. I'm a huge pumpkin spice fan. So I know I have a really bad background noise, but we do have some questions. I'm going to go ahead and start, and then you can just take it over. So the first question and if you have any questions, please drop it in the chat, and then we'll go ahead and ask Ernie as well. The first one is, so CSS is like clothes someone wears, and HTML is like the body.
A little bit. It's interesting. I usually say the skeletal system, right? The body is also a great analogy. Another common one we'll use is the house. So if the house is the frame of the house, then the CSS is the kind of the out, like the paint, right? And then the JavaScript is anything that brings in kind of functionality. Yeah, I think I like that. I like that analogy. It's great.
Okay, awesome. And another question we had is, what if you don't know all three languages like CSS, HTML, and JavaScript? Would that affect the design at all, or like how do you compromise?
Sure, sure. Oh, that's a great question, right? So, it's funny because a lot of the early web focused on just one thing, HTML, right? Did you guys notice some of those early web pages, right? At the end of the day, that was just content, right? Literal words that they wanted to share with, at that point, a very, very small internet. So you can absolutely build HTML pages, and you can absolutely build visual, bring visuals to that content, right? At the end of the day, the internet is all about content, right? It's why people connect to the internet so much, because there's communities of various types that talk and interact through it, but that's based on content. JavaScript comes into play when you want to bring interaction to things, right? If you want, if we're going to tie it into the English language, if HTML is the nouns, then JavaScript would be the verbs, right? They do things, right? They added functionality. In our case, it was to bring up a message when we clicked on the button. So it's absolutely fine to build something that doesn't necessarily have JavaScript. It's not a requirement.
Sorry, I'm just gonna drop the question in the chat just because they're fixing my roof. But
No worries, no worries. So a question that we have in chat is, how long are your boot camps for coding? So if we are not talking about the Wintroductions, it's usually 10 weeks, 10 to 11 weeks. Judah, who's here also, do you want to confirm? I think it's usually 10 weeks for curriculum, and then we usually also add an extra week for something career-based, like a career week.
Yeah, and with oh, we got some echoes. Do you guys hear an echo?
No, I don't. I think you sound
okay. And with the different events, the different types of parts of the curriculum where people actually build portfolios, have critiques and feedback. Yeah. I mean, all of that added into it, 10 to 12 weeks.
Yeah. So a big part of Wyncode, tying into the next follow-up question, how do you guys help with job placements, is exactly that, right? So we do have, I do know of students that join Wyncode with some web development experience, but join explicitly to be part of, the job placement program. We absolutely have a jobs placement person that helps, Wyncode graduates, and not just graduates, Wyncode alumni with jobs, right? We also have something called Win Talent, which also kind of works with kind of talent acquisition and things like that. So yes, absolutely, definitely kind of an integral part of how Wyncode works, not just with, of course, the learning of web development.
Awesome. And how long have you been coding for? I mean, let's hear a little bit more about you, Ernie.
Oh man. So to kind of give you an idea of how old I am, I graduated college in 2000. So I was definitely tinkering with some of those old school web pages in the mid 90s, right? I was fortunate enough I'm originally from the Bay Area, San Francisco. I was fortunate enough to be in an area right after college where a scene became big. I actually graduated with a computer science and electrical engineering degree, but at that time, both my interests and the industry, the web development thing became big at a time, and I just kind of jumped in feet first, never left. So I've been doing this on and off for, aging myself here, over 20 years.
I mean, since you've been coding for so long, like what are some of the benefits that you would say to think like a coder, like additional benefits?
Oh man, that's a great question. Thinking about a problem in different ways that you hadn't thought of before, I think, is the big one, right? Trying to figure out, okay, well, is there other things that people have done, right? And is it based on that problem? Can I split it up into chunks? Are there things that exist already? Are there parts of things that exist already? It definitely helps you think differently, especially for kind of complex situations, because you're thinking in a way, like in a very kind of programmatically. I don't have a better way to explain it, because you're breaking things up into smaller. That has absolutely kind of been something that's almost kind of like part of me now that I've done this for so long. Does anyone have any? Oh, sorry. Does anyone have any additional questions for Ernie? But yeah, I'm happy to answer any other questions you all may have.
Awesome. So okay. So there is one more question. Is there a specific type of person that can learn to code?
No, I think a lot of people are intimidated about, oh, well, I'm not that type of person, right? Like, I don't need, I am, that's just for me. I'm not, the stereotype, right? If you've ever seen Silicon Valley, right? The guy in the hoodie, right? And then all the other guys that kind of look like that guy in the hoodie, right? And it's absolutely something that I'm cognizant of, and I'm cognizant enough that I definitely want to be part of the movement to break those stereotypes, right? I do think that anyone can learn to code. I absolutely think that anyone can learn to think programmatically, right? So I do think that is helpful, and I don't think that there's a specific type of person that needs to learn it. Let me take a look at one more that I see in chat. My company is building an app for the iOS environment. If we are needing a company website to accompany the app, would we want a full stack web developer to build it? To be totally transparent, you don't necessarily have to, right? And when I say, and the key here is full stack, because full stack consists of not just the web pages, right, that we're talking about, but there are things like databases and servers and things like that, right? There are a lot of software that helps you with different parts of this, right? WordPress, you've probably heard of WordPress, but there's other things too. Things like, man, I mean, you throw a rock and you could hit 12 of those. Things like Contentful and Webflow and Drupal and everything under the sun, right? So at the end of the day, what you want, it's a matter of trying to understand what your needs are for the company website, right? If it is a pure brochure piece, then that's going to have a different set of needs than, oh, I also want on my website to include a complex pricing thing. Oh, and it should also actually build out those blueprints from a web interface. Now we're talking slightly different things, right? But the end of the day, it also comes to what are the things that are essential, what would be nice to have, and then trying to understand the needs from those. So I guess it's just a longer, more fancier way of saying it depends on the situation.
Okay, thank you, Ernie.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So I want to thank everybody for being here again, on a Friday, especially the Friday for Halloween. Thank you, Ernie. That was an awesome presentation. We loved the 8-ball reference. You made it really easy. I'm already getting some great feedback in the chat.
Great.
But yeah, I'm gonna be sending a follow-up email with some of the stuff we covered and a little bit more information on Wyncode. So I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks, Ernie.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.